Welcome. This is just a little bit about me that you see on your screen here. I am going to just let you read it real quick, and that's just a bit about me, and we are going to move on. So welcome to Leadership on Video Calls. This is kind of what we're doing right now, and just wanting to give everyone an opportunity to learn and grow together as we go through this really fun time where the way that we connect is over Zoom or any of the other video chat platforms. And I'm just going to tell you that technically speaking, I'm not here to talk to you about the technical details about how to use Zoom. My focus is going to be on how we present ourselves on Zoom and how we can connect more easily with other people. So as you can see, I have a little slide here about neuroscience. I am going to drop a quick link in the chat box right now for a TED Talk that I give to a lot of my clients, which is by Amy Cuddy. And it's about the neuroscience behind how we can connect more easily with other people, for starters, by doing something that's called power posing. Give me 1 second here. I'm just going to admit one more person who's joining us. And so the neuroscience, the reason why I get to talk to you about this is because I have had 16 years working in the medical setting, and it's kind of a neuroscience nerdy thing for me that I get excited about. So that's part of the reason why I'm going to talk to you about it. And I am just going to ask Lorna, thank you so much for joining with us. I am going to stop your video, and I'm going to make sure everyone is muted. And thank you again, Lorna, for joining us. I wanted to speak a little bit to the TED Talk, but I'm going to let Amy Cuddy present her own work because I think she does a really fabulous job of it. So the link is in the chat box again. Invite all of you to look at that at your leisure later. But she talks about how the science supports that when we do things like power posing, before we get on a call like this, before we go to a networking meeting or a presentation that we're doing, we do things like power posing, and how it helps give us nice feedback loop to our brain to say, I'm feeling comfortable, I'm feeling confident, I'm feeling really good about this interaction that I'm going to have. And I can promise you, as someone who's a little bit of an introvert, I have been doing my power posing, and it is definitely helpful. It helps me feel more confident. And interestingly, the science shows that even if none of you knew that about me, that on a neuroscience level, just on that subconscious level, that all of you view me as more confident and more competent. Thank you for that. I appreciate your brains all doing that for me. But that is something that I like to share with my clients, because that's something that you can do easily for yourself as well. Whenever you're going to get on a call or have a presentation, or we go back to being able to be physically present in front of each other, being able to connect more meaningfully on a subconscious and on a conscious level. So just wanted to toss that out there as a free resource to all of you that I love to share. So a second thing that I like to talk about that's a really easy way to connect with people, both over the internet in this case, and when we're back in person together, is smiling to your eyes. And what I mean about that is they have research that they have done that shows if you only smile with the lower half of your face, you do one of the little fake smiles like, hey, that people have been stuffed into an MRI machine and they literally feel nothing in their brain when they see the fake smile. So if you can activate the muscles around your eyes, and ladies, I know we're like, oh my goodness, crow's feet, but actually activating the muscles around your eyes actually elicits in the other person oxytocin. It's the cuddle hormone or the connection hormone that says, I feel warmer, I feel more connected, I feel like this is a conversation, an interaction that I'm excited to have. And that's a really beautiful way to share that feeling with other people. Is just when you get on the call, smile to your eyes. Make sure that it goes all the way up to your eyes so that you're sharing that warm sensation with someone else and helping us feel more connected right now. So that's something really easy that you can do for your teams when you get on these calls together. All right, so I'm going to feather in the neuroscience as we go along. So we're just going to move ahead, and we're going to talk about one of my other favorite things, which Micah can relate to this. Micah and I attended the same body language training class together, so I'm so excited she's here today. But body language is super important. the huge majority of the information that we send out has to do with how we're holding ourselves, our posture, our smile, our facial expressions, our hand gestures. And helping people feel more connected right now is super important. And one of the ways that you can do that is through your body language. All of you, if I'm going to show you on the next slide, if you want a really quick, easy way to make people uncomfortable, ways that you can do that are to make sure that you're not on eye level. I'm going to show you on the next slide a picture of how I have my setup done so that my camera on my laptop and my eyes are at eye level so that you all on a subconscious level feel that I want to be a team member with you. I'm in this together with you. Whereas if I am, and I'm going to give the demonstration, where if I'm leaning down over you, you feel that I'm looming and that I'm being authoritative. So people who sit there with their laptop beneath them, looking up at them, that is the view that you're giving them. And that is the sense that you're giving them is, I think that I'm dominant over you. So try to be more on eye level with your camera, however that is, on your iPhone, on your regular phone, sorry, PJ, on your other phones besides Apple products, or on your laptop. Make sure that you're eye level. And make sure that you're also not doing the I'm looking up at my camera, because that gives the feeling that you're not as confident. And definitely as a speaker, you want to be presenting yourself as confidently as possible. So just on the technical side of it, on the logistical side of it, just make sure you're at that eye level with your camera. So next thing I want to say is we do tend to, when we get nervous or other things where we might get thoughtful, is we do tend to start to cover our mouths a little bit. And the other thing that I see a fair amount of is people who have either profile photos or they're doing things like this. Ladies, this is probably more of a concern, although I think more of us are getting to this stage without haircuts. But if you have any part of your face covered, it creates the sense that you're hiding something, that you're not trustworthy, or that you don't really want to be a part of this conversation. So that's not a sense that you want to give people. You really want to be able to connect well with your teams right now, or anyone you're having a conversation with. So make sure that your face is visible. It's facing the camera so that it's giving that same sense of, I want to be connected with you, and I want this to be a warm interaction. So make sure, another thing that I've seen a little bit of is people who sit too far back, where they are doing this, you know, sorry, I'm going to stand up just for a little bit. They're doing the crossing their arms in front of themselves or sitting too far back. This is essentially the same thing as when we are talking in person and someone doesn't want to be close to us and feels like they need to stand far away. Now, this is an interesting topic because of the physical distancing that we're supposed to be doing right now. But while you're on a Zoom call, no one's going to catch any germs from you. So make sure that you're standing in close enough proximity so that people feel like you actually want to have this conversation. Now, obviously, there is a limit. You don't want to be too close. No one looks good that close, and certainly not first thing in the morning. So make sure that you're using appropriate distancing. Now, I do understand that there are differences culturally in what's appropriate. So try to gauge your audience for what's appropriate for you and your audience, but try not to be too far back. That creates that distance from each other as well. So I talked a little bit about closed versus open body posture. That's making sure your shoulders are back, they're up, you're sitting in a very confident fashion, you're not having your arms crossed in front of you. And I'm sorry, I'm just going to adjust my laptop just a little bit more because I'm getting some of my gestures not being inside the box. And that's one of the other things is making sure that people can actually see your gestures. If I'm doing a lot of things down here where all you're seeing is the top part of my fingers going by, people have that sense of, what's she doing? What's going on down there? What am I missing? And no one likes to feel that sense of, I'm missing something. So if you're going to use your hands, bring them up here, use them out to the side, not in front of your face. Excuse me. This apparently is going to be my morning voice for a second here. Pardon me. So make sure your hands are up, not in front of your face where people can actually see them, because otherwise you're kind of gesturing for yourself down here and people are missing out on that. Okay, another way that I like to just share is I want you to all think about everything in moderation. One of those is eye contact, which I'm going to cover a little bit later, but another one is warmth. A lot of us, well, a fair number of us, when we are in person with someone else, we might reach out and touch them on the shoulder or on their arm as a way to connect. And right now we can't do that, but there is a way in body language that you can indicate warmth a little bit easier than having to touch someone or reaching out and having your hand look weird in front of your camera. And that is to use a slight head tilt. And a lot of us do this pretty naturally. I tend to go to the left. You'll notice I do sometimes go to the right, but I tend to go to the left, and that's you just add a little bit to that. If I were to say to you, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that, that doesn't have as much meaning for you as if I say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Now, obviously, for a lot of you can tell I changed my inflection as well. But the difference in the warmth is you can add just a little bit if you want to indicate caring and that connectivity when you can't reach out and touch someone. And again, make sure touching once you go back to it is appropriate, but this is a way to indicate that. All right. I think we're all good. Let me see if I have anything. No, we're all good. Thank you, Jacqueline. That's very, very kind of you. All right, one last thing I want to say is I don't know about all of you, but I have learned something about myself being on some of these video calls, and that is that when I get very concentrating with some of my clients, my resting facial expression is what I'm going to call it, sometimes isn't as warm and friendly as it might be. So I'm going to encourage all of you to learn from that experience that try to have your resting facial expression be something of a slight smile. It doesn't have to be big cheesy grin or anything like that, because sometimes that's not appropriate for the topic that is being shared with you by the other person. But if your resting face can be something that maybe doesn't look like how mine did and be just that slight bit more warm, that will help. And I'm going to tell you, in the Zoom video context, when it freezes, not if, but when it freezes, it's really helpful if how your face freezes isn't the way sometimes mine has looked. So that's just a little side note for you. Okay, let us move on to eye contact, which I have mentioned. So make sure, I know it's really difficult when you're on a side-by-side Zoom video call. It's really easy to want to look at the person and see their face. So what I'm going to suggest to you is, as you are presenting, make sure that you are actually looking at your camera, because for all of you, how you feel is that I'm making eye contact for you. And so even though I can't see any of you right now, what you are feeling is I am speaking to you. I want to connect to you. I'm actually paying attention and showing respect to you by looking into your eyes, even though I can't see them right now. So over Zoom and other video platforms, make sure that when you are speaking, look at your camera so that your audience feels like you're connected to you. That's super, super important. And that's another reason why the eye contact being at eye level is really helpful as well. So what that does, since I like neuroscience, and we're going to bring that up again, is, as I mentioned earlier, it elicits what we call a mirror neuron response. It elicits the oxytocin release in someone else's brain so that they feel more connected to you. And it's a really powerful way that you can give someone a positive feeling inside of themselves, for themselves, and also then they associate that with you, which can only help our conversations with each other right now, is if we feel more warm and connected. All right. As I mentioned, I'm going to touch briefly. It's a little bit awkward, but this is about the gazing that you see on your screen. There's different types of gazing. So if you have a tendency to only look at people's eyes and then up to their forehead, that is a very authoritative and more dominant eye gaze, which can be appropriate depending on who you're speaking to. But I just want you to be aware that that's the case. This is a little bit more towards when we get back to standing in front of each other in person, but it can help on Zoom as well to remember that if you show that pattern, even if someone can tell you're looking at a different part of the screen, which is probably their face, and if you look in that small of an area, they're going to feel a little bit more that you're speaking to them as an authoritative figure. The next one down, or the next one over in this case, is social gazing, where you're looking between their eyes and down to their mouth. This is pretty frequent for people who have a little bit of difficulty hearing. They will look to the mouth to get some additional feedback, especially if it's a noisy environment, to gather more of what you're saying from the context of your mouth movements. The third one is something that I do want you to be careful of, and that is that if you look between the eyes and then further down more towards the clavicles. That is a more intimate gazing. So I'm just going to suggest that please be intentional about your gaze. Make sure that if you accidentally say look down towards someone's neck chain or someone's necklace, that you understand that that has invited a different level of intentionality for the conversation. So you as bosses, as leaders, just want to make sure you're being a little bit careful about that. And then obviously I'm not even going to discuss that's as far down as you need to look. Ever. So unless it's a completely different context. So, all right. Oh, actually, I'm going to cover one more thing. So sorry, I have my little notes here and I missed one of those. Some of you may have seen that on LinkedIn, I did a little post about this. I did a video about this. And this is that I will use a sticky note or a post-it note with an arrow on it, because sometimes on our devices, it's hard to see where the camera is. So to help draw your eye to the exact place that you need to look instead of looking at yourself on the screen, which I see a lot of people doing because we're very pretty. So we look at ourselves to make sure you're actually looking at your audience. This is for videos that you record as well as for Zoom conferences. While you're speaking, make sure that you're looking at your camera. And if you have difficulty looking at yourself, because like for me, I'm the only one that I can see on the screen right now. This is a quick sort of low tech, cheap way that you can help draw your eye to where you need to be making the best connection to your audience. That's a little quick tip there. All right, now we'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so I have done a couple of posts about this, about being a bit vulnerable. I'm going to tell you, I tend to be on the more introverted side of the scale of the introvert-extrovert. World needs everyone, so thank you for whoever you are along that scale. For me, I just happen to be on the more introverted side. So things like this make me a little bit nervous, which is why power posing is a thing for me. So that level of vulnerability is what I'm talking about. I've shared that with you. Hopefully, all of you feel like, oh, Elaine's doing this. Isn't that amazing? And the hope is that the reason why I share that with you is that I might inspire one of you who may be a little bit more on the introverted side to say, you know what, if Elaine can do it, so can I. And that is my hope. And that is my point for being a leader right now. And when you're talking to your teams, making sure that you're at least a little bit vulnerable. I don't ever advocate oversharing as a leader, but what I tell my clients is starting out those calls with, hey, you know what, I'm kind of crawling the walls right now, or I'm getting a little antsy with all of this. How are all the rest of you doing? Is a really nice way to show your team that you're in this with them. It's not, hey, I got this, I'm totally good. All the rest of you are just freaking out and I don't know why. It says we're all in this together and we're going to get through this. And we're all feeling the stress of this. And how can we connect more effectively? And that is to be real and to be authentic and to be genuine. Not oversharing, but to be genuine. So things that I hear that share vulnerability right now from my clients, one of the ones that I hear a lot right now is, oh my word, my kids are driving me crazy. And that's just a really quick statement that doesn't have to go into how many children you have or in what ways they're driving you crazy. But it says, you know what, I'm in this with you. And we got this. We're going to get through this. And then you can commiserate a little if it's appropriate, depending on the call environment. And then you feel more connected. So that's what I'm going to invite you to do, is just be a little bit vulnerable. You don't have to overshare again. All right. We are good on the questions in the chat box. Thank you, Rohit, for your kind compliment. So we are going to take listening as our next one. So this one, I am sure most of you are really awesome at this right now. I'm not showing you good listening. I'm showing you good talking instead, since I'm the only one talking. But being a good listener is so important because it's one of the quickest ways that you can show respect to somebody. Making sure that if you are getting on a team call, that you show the intentionality of saying, I want this to be a brainstorming session. And how do we do that? We say, I'm going to listen first and I'm going to speak last as the leader. A little shout out to Nelson Mandela for that concept of saying, if you walk into a room, or in this case, you come onto a Zoom conference call and you say, hey, I have this great idea. I think this will be perfect. What do you all think? You've killed any brainstorming that you're going to get. And especially, I'm going to say, from someone who's an introvert, I'm really unlikely to share in a group setting unless I'm called upon, unless I feel like what I'm going to say is going to add the value that I hope. and certainly not if you've already told me what you think is the best idea. So I'm going to invite you to get on the call and say, hey, here is something that I would love for us to brainstorm a solution on, and I want to hear from each and every one of you. And then wait and let the extroverts go first, because y'all are wonderful and you're going to do that, and that's amazing. But then make sure you actually demonstrate that you do want to hear from everybody. So at the end, I am going to invite everyone to ask a question, and you don't have to if you don't want to, but for those of you who feel comfortable, I am going to give you the opportunity to ask your questions and wait for all of you to have the opportunity, because I want all of you to know that I respect the time that you're spending with me today. So that is the kind of thing that I would like for you to do for your teams right now, and the people that you get on the phone with, is give them that opportunity to speak, especially since there are a variety of people that we're talking to right now, extroverts and introverts, and some of us jump in right away, and some of us wait a little while, or maybe never. So invite people into the conversation. Make sure that you're showing them good listening by not just talking over them. All right, the concept that I really love to talk about is listening to understand, not just to respond. We've all had the experience of someone not really paying attention to us, or going, oh, yeah, and you know they're not really listening. They're just waiting for their chance to talk. And they will interject as soon as you're done talking, pretty much no matter what you said. And we can get excited. This happens to all of us. But make sure you're pausing to listen. And something that I like to recommend to my clients is pause that moment. When you've heard someone say something, and then clarify to them what your understanding of what they said was, to make sure that you're actually on the same page. Just because we have purveyed words out into the environment doesn't mean that someone else has received it the same way. An example I'm going to give to you is that I was talking to someone about this webinar, and they said, oh, and then you're going to do an AMA section. And where my brain went was my hospital setting, since that's where I'm most familiar with. And that's when someone leaves against medical advice. And I didn't understand how that would fit with a webinar. And of course, what this person meant is what I refer to as a question and answer session, which I totally get. So if they had said, oh, you're going to have a Q&A session, I was like, yeah, totally going to have a Q&A session. So that is the difference, is some of us have terminology because of the industries that we work in that other people don't understand. So make sure that you pause for a moment, kind of paraphrase, you don't have to repeat it exactly, what you heard the other person say, just to make sure you're still on the same page, to make sure that you aren't starting to talk about two different topics, because sometimes that can be fun and sometimes that can be really, really not okay, especially in the work setting. So as some of our moms have probably said to us, just remember you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and please use them proportionately. All right. I think I have done this really well. I'm just going to tell all of you that during last night's presentation, I was so good about turning off all my distractions that I had muted my speaker on my computer, and so I couldn't hear anyone else. So that was fun. So I am going to let you guys ask me your questions now. I'm going to unmute all of you. Some of you are still muted for yourself, so I'm going to let you decide if you want to come back on. But any questions for me? Anything else you would like for me to dive into a little bit more specifically? I know we went through quite a bit really fast, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Any questions?
Okay. Can I ask, or?
Yes, please, go ahead. I think that's
Yeah,
Rohit. Yes.
yes, a very informative, interesting webinar. I was looking all the points, and very patiently and very interestingly, I got this thing in my mind to ask that how at times it becomes difficult for not only for the leaders but for the speaker also to put the words into context, the right meaning to convey to at times it's the speakers skip that thing. So what all measures we need to take, Elaine, like what all things we should keep in mind when we are putting the words into context, and what the message that you are trying to convey, that it should not get skipped, and with less amount of time, with less time, you convey the most of your message. That's what I want to ask.
Okay, I'm not entirely sure I understand your question, Rohit, but hopefully this will answer it. What I would suggest to you is, of course, as a speaker, make sure you're prepared. that you know what you're going to cover, you know how you're going to cover it, what the flow is. You don't need to use a PowerPoint presentation like I have. That just helps me. But also know your audience. If
Yeah,
you know your audience, then you're going to know the context, the
right.
kinds of things, of examples that you should use. When I'm speaking to more salespeople, when my client is a salesperson, I'm going to use more sales terms. When someone is a teacher or a professor, I'm going to use more educational examples. So does
Okay,
that
right.
kind of answer your question?
Yes, actually, what I was trying to ask that putting the words into the right context, like whatever you have prepared for the presentation, that
Mhm.
at times it becomes because you always have less time. Like if you have 20 minutes, so you have to convey your message within that time frame, and it should be equally it should be comprehensive and comprehensible by everyone. So
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to ask, that using more examples, as you rightly said, will make it more easy for
Yeah,
any speaker, or for that matter leader, to convey his message or her message.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Very good point. Thank you, Rohit. All right.
Thank you again.
Absolutely. So we have about 8 minutes left. Who else has a question for me? Anybody? I'm not going to call anybody out today. I did
Hello,
not.
Elaine.
Hello. Who do I have?
Hello. Thank you very much for creating this wonderful training, first of all. And well, my question to you is, how would you react in a leadership setting where someone doesn't agree with the rules they are set or with the agreement that the company has? Someone who is not complying with the rules, how would you go with that in a better way so you can influence that person?
So what I would often encourage, and obviously your question is a very complex one, so I'm going to give a pretty high level answer. What I always encourage is to go to that person, have a one-on-one conversation with them, and say, what are you struggling with right now? That is something that can be very elucidating to finding out, what is the struggle. Is it, I'm having a really hard time at home, I'm having a lot of stress at home, and I'm expressing my frustration at work because I can't at home? That can be something that you can say, well, here in the United States, we have something called an employee assistance program, where someone can be hooked up with a counselor, depending on what the frustration, where is it coming from? And you're not going to know unless you go to them and have that sometimes painful and difficult conversation. Does that help at all?
Wow, yes, absolutely. That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? No? Let's see. Lorna says, I have a question. How do you stop people from talking over each other? Well, Lorna, as you might have noticed, for this type of setting, I just muted all of you. That seems not necessarily effective. No, that's terrible. But I would like to suggest that you set the rules. I can't remember, you joined just like a minute late, but what I had said was, I'd like everyone to say hi. You can put your comments in the chat box, and then I'm going to mute all of you, and then I will give you an opportunity towards the end. That's kind of setting the rules of engagement, is what how some people call that, is to say, if you find that people talk over each other, you can reset the rules for this to say, you know what, I really want us to be a respectful team that works well with each other. And one of the ways that we can show respect is only one person speaks at a time. Does that help at all? And let's see, Shalini has asked, what are your body language tips for videos? Make sure you're in the screen, Shalini. Make sure that your hand gestures are up. Make sure that you are sitting in a confident manner or standing in a confident manner, so that the way you appear to somebody is that you're confident and you're competent in the message that you are presenting. Does that help? Does that cover your question?
Can I ask a question, please? It's Tony.
Okay, and I'm hearing somebody, but I don't know who it is.
Yes, Tony.
Oh, Renee. Okay.
Tony, what I wanted to ask was about the fact that with a lot of teams, you get a diversity of learners in terms of kinesthetic, audio and visual learning. And I think sometimes as employers, leaders, we take it for granted that everybody learns in a particular way. So how can we maximize engagement through you know, whether it's learning or a group meeting through, like, for example, an online place like Zoom? How can we maximize engagement through the different learning styles?
So what I like to suggest, and you're going to find that I'm someone who kind of harps on communication, is ask people what works best for you. What's going to help this be a really effective call for you? Sometimes that's having one-on-one conversations with your team outside of the team meeting, just to say what would make it a more effective meeting. Sometimes you can make that be part of your team meeting to say, hey, you know, this is kind of weird for all of us. What's going to make this most effective for you? And then you as the leader, you incorporate as much of that as you can. And sometimes for some people, just being able to say it helps them feel heard. And then maybe a secondary learning, you know, kinesthetic versus, you know, auditory, they can adapt a little bit if they feel respected and if they feel heard. Does that help? I know that's a pretty high level answer. I'm going to answer a quick question for Jacqueline. She says, when practicing the power pose before presenting, how long do you need to practice this for? I will tell you, in Amy Cuddy's talk, she says 2 minutes. So really, that it doesn't take very long and you can do it. I will tell you, while I was brushing my teeth, getting ready for this, I'm like standing superwoman pose, brushing my teeth like this. You can coordinate it with other things. You have kids. I know you know how to multitask. Does that help? Did that answer your question, Tony? I'm gonna hope maybe. I know I'm giving really high level answers. If you guys have more in-depth questions for me, please feel free to reach out. So we are coming up on the end of our time. I want to be super respectful. You're welcome, Jacqueline. Can you share more information on your training? I'm going to say out of respect for everyone's time, Sam, I would love to just invite you, and I'm going to show it right now here. I would love to just invite you, go to my LinkedIn profile. There's a lot about my training there. I'm a little crazy when it comes to how many certifications I have, so I won't bore everyone with reading my certifications or talking about that. I do have an amount of things that I have gotten certified in because I just love to learn. So I know that's a little bit redirective, but my LinkedIn profile is there. If we aren't connected on LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out to me. And thank you guys so much for spending some of your time with me today. And Sam is asking training sessions. Please reach out to me, Sam. I would be happy to talk to you about that. And PJ says, thank you so much. Thank you. You guys have been a really amazing audience. And just remember, we are all in this together. And if there's anything I can do to help any one of you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I just really appreciate the time that you shared with me today.